Hello exiles and welcome to my Golemancer build guide video. This is the first time I made my own minion build and it is about golems. I played this build in Crucible in hardcore solo self-found and enjoyed it a lot, so thought I would share it. I played minions once in Legion League based on someone else's build when I first started the game and didn't touch minions since then on a serious gameplay point. So, build explanation. This build has a couple key uniques to function as it is intended to be. First and the most important one is Triad Grip. We use 4 green sockets on Triad Grip to convert all minion physical damage into cold. We use stone golems to make the best use of this. Other uniques, though not really necessary to get the build going but still needed, are Vis Mortis, Primordial Chain, Baited Breath, and later on Primordial Jewels. Vis Mortis let minions gain 20% of elemental damage as extra chaos damage, and since we converted all our physical damage into cold, we make full use of this affix. It also gives great amounts of energy shield. Primordial Chain for +3 golems, and the Primordial affix to reach 3 primordial items. Baited Breath for getting great energy shield related stats, and Primordial Jewels to get even more power and golems. We use many side skills to help our damage and make gameplay more interactive at the same time. Frostbite as obvious curse of choice, Frost Bomb for exposure, Frost Blink linked with Bone Chill for extra damage, Wall Haste as occasional damage boost button. Our offering of choice is Flesh Offering, and at later stages we use it on a trigger wand. We get Desecrate for those boss fights where corpses are hard to come by to use our offering. Molten Shell on cast when damage taken for extra survivability. And lastly, Convocation to reposition our golems when needed. For auras, we use Hatred linked to Generosity to double our damage, Purity of Elements to get elemental ailment immune for both us and our golems, Discipline to get a lot of energy shield, and later on with some investment, Determination to significantly boost our and our minions' survivability. We also get Chaos Inoculation Keystone to get Chaos Immune. Since it is already a bit of a task to cap our resists and get attributes dealing with chaos resistance is not something we want. Pros and cons. Pros: great clear, good bossing, minions do all the work for you, easy to start the build going with cheap items. Cons: physical damage is scary. Not the tankiest build out there, even though not squishy, play carefully. Endgame gear may get pricey. May struggle to get unique items in solo self-found. For Ascendancy, we first get Liege of the Primordial for resummoning our golems much conveniently, and that +1 maximum number of summoned golems stat. Then if you are playing hardcore, I recommend getting Bastion of Elements to get that Primal Aegis for extra survivability, or if you just don't care like me, you can get another golem. Then I suggest getting one or the other, the one that you didn't get. And lastly, we get Mastermind of Discord. The Path of Building link is in the description, and it shows you basic passive allocation throughout the game. On early game, focus on these parts of the tree, mid game, and last but not least, end game. In early game, to help with getting attributes, I recommend getting Practical Application. In later stages of the game, we will anoint this to our amulet. In mid game, we get most our useful passives, but leave out Primordial Jewels, Cluster Jewels. In endgame, we first get our cluster jewel setup to get determination in our build, which will help our survivability considerably. Then as we get more currency, we move on to primordial jewels. After that, in the very end game, the way to level 100, we get this part of the tree. In early game, getting a 4 link is very important, which I hope you will acquire at about level 34, which is the level you get to equip your Stone Golem for the first time. With Stone Golem, we link minion damage, Feeding Frenzy to make our minions aggressive, and Predator Sport to target minions to specific rares or bosses when needed. We get Purity of Elements early on the game to get elemental ailment immune for both us and our golems, Desecrate for our offering, and Wall Haste for damage button. We don't enable normal haste as we don't have mana for it. Frostblink for movement, Molten Shell, self-cast Molten Shell, Hatred linked with Generosity for great amounts of damage. We cast Frostbomb and Frostbite when needed on packs, on rares, on bosses. Otherwise we wait around, dodging attacks, waiting our golems to finish the boss or the pack. In mid-game, we promote ourselves to a 6 link if you are an SSF or you can't afford a 6 link at this point. You can drop elemental damage with attack support, as it gives lower damage than the melee physical damage support. We introduce discipline to our build. If you can get a wall discipline, it is a great panic button. In endgame, when we have, and this is very much endgame, we try to replace our support gems with awakened versions where available. That means awakened minion damage, awakened elemental damage with attacks, and awakened melee physical damage. And try to get level 21 Summon Stone Golem gem. At this point, you need to have the cluster setup to fit determination into the build. And I'm sure you can get your hands on a corrupted but failed level 3 Enlightened gem without it being too expensive. If you can get a level 4, even better. When I was playing this, I didn't find many useful green gems to put in our Triad Grip, as it always has to have 4 green sockets. If you are playing on softcore, you can socket Cast on Death with Portal, or you can go for a Smoke Mine linked with Second Wind Sport. I personally don't enjoy the gameplay of Smoke Mine, so I decided not to use it, but it is up to you. One good thing about using Stone Golems is they can taunt enemies with their slam attack, which is great for survivability, as enemies are not targeting you but they are targeting your Stone Golems, and you have a lot of Stone Golems out, so enemies will be focused on them quite a bit of the time. For Pantheon, as we don't have much physical damage reduction, we try to make up for it as little as it is with Pantheon choices. For Minor God, we use Soul of Kutkul to mitigate at least a little bit of that physical damage while mapping. And for Major God, I personally don't care much about switching, but if you really want to min-max your gameplay while mapping, you can use Soul of Lunaris, and while bossing you can use Soul of Solaris. For our early game items, try to get yourself a basic Calling Wand with at least minions deal increased damage stat and minions have increased attack and cast speed stat. If you can't get it or you're playing in solo self-fun, it is alright. Just try to level with what you have. Our early game shield should have defensive stats. If it is a bone spirit shield or any spirit shield that gives minions deal increased damage, great. You can drop the minions deal increased damage affix for better defensive stats early on in the game. It's not the biggest deal, but later on you may want to get one that has that affix. If you can find a cheap +1 to all minion gems affix helmet early in the league, great. If you can't, go for the best defensive helmet. Again, defensive early game body armor. At this point, you can equip your tried grip. So equip it, 4-socket it, and turn those sockets into green. This is gonna be a bit of a task because it is a strength and intelligence base, but it is doable. Early game boots, you will want movement speed, as this build is not the fastest build out there. Try to get a boot with movement speed as well as defensive stats. Primordial chain, you can equip them at the same level with your stone golem gem. Try to find good rolled primordial chain amulet with a better golem steel, less damage affix. In early game, we help cap our resistances with rings. If it doesn't have stats on it, craft them. Craft your stats wherever you can, and whatever item you found or on the trade site, try to find the best resist and stat items for time being on rings. Life roll can be lower. Try to get those stats and resistances. In mid game, try to get your hands on a clay shaper. It is not an expensive item, it is a very cheap item. It is an easy best in slot for mid game, as it gives plus number to summon golems, as well as golems have added physical damage. We ignore the summon stone golem skill it grants, as we have a better one linked with better things. But if you can't have a 4-link in the mid game at that point, if you're in solo self-found and found this item, you can try to socket your sport gems for easy 4-link. Mid game, try to get yourself a plus minion skill gems or plus spell skill gems, which is hard to get, or plus physical spell skill gems. Shield with minions deal increased damage affix as well as resistances, and try to craft a attribute on it, either dexterity or strength. If you can't find a plus level shield cheap, or if you're again in solo self-found, just get one with minions deal increased damage. At this point you need some damage, and you should get that affix on your minion shield. In mid game, this part is mostly for trade league. If you're in solo self-found, you may have problems finding these items, so go for rare versions of these. I chose these unique items as they give good amounts of armor as well as energy shield as well as attributes, and doesn't have downsides for our build. That's why I used them. If you can find a better item in trade league, go for it. These are temporary items to prepare us for endgame. This Mortis, at this point you can equip it. Tried grip, at this point you should have that 4 green sockets. March of the Legion, same thing with Aunt's Contempt. Placeholder item, a great item for mid game. A placeholder item, you can replace it at any point in the game if you can find a better replacement for it. At this point you should have an anoint on your primordial chain amulet. If you need stats, I recommend practical application, as it gives 20 strength as well as 20 dexterity. But But if you have enough stats, go for something else, maybe energy shield for survivability or some other minion notable. At this point in the game, I recommend getting at least one bone ring for that increased damage effects, or one with increased attack and cast speed effects. If you can't, it's okay, but if you're in trade league, try to get one. Again, to fix our resistances, a resist based ring, depending on which resistance you are missing, try to get one with attributes. At this point in the game, we allocated our Chaos Inoculation keystone, and Bated Breath is a must. I recommend getting a Stibnite Flask with bleed immunity, Granite Flask with armor, Quicksilver Flask, Jade Flask with evasion, and Corundum Flask with avoid being stunned during effects. Corundum Flask is important to mitigate stun, as our build is energy shield based, or you can get the mastery point for it. If you wanna save one passive point, go for the flask. If you have another good flask in mind, go for the mastery point. It's up to you. In endgame, please get at least one plus level 2 skill gems. It can be all spell skill gems, all minion skill gems, or all physical skill gems, because Summon Stone Golem is a physical skill gem. Please get at least one affix of gem level. You should get increased damage and attack and cast speed with empty suffix to craft trigger craft. In the end game, these items are gonna be a bit pricey, but this is very end game, and you'll gradually get there, upgrading one item at a time. Try to get again at least one gem level affix on this on your shield. Maximum resistances are also good. Try to get high amounts of minions deal increased damage affix, and craft strength and dexterity bench craft on it, which you can get from unveiling items. In the end game, we switched to a bone helmet. If you can get a lab runner on it, or you can run labs yourself, get the stone golems deal increased damage enchantment on it. Plus 2 level of all minion skill gems may be quite pricey, but at least go for a +1 with good resistances, attributes, and defense. Maybe not all at once, quickly, but gradually get there. In endgame, try to get +2 level of socketed minion gems on your Vis Mortis. This is great amount of damage increase from gem levels. It is not a priority, but if you can get it on a 6-linked Vis Mortis, there's nothing more you can ask. Try to corrupt every single triad grip you have or you can find to get that increased maximum energy shield one. It's a minor increase, but it is an increase nonetheless. In the end game, for our end game boots, I went for 2-tone boots to fix my elemental resistances, but if you can fix your elemental resistances already, go for another boot and put movement speed and increase cooldown of travel skills implicits by Exarch and Aether. With our endgame primordial chain, try to corrupt every primordial chain you can get your hands on to get that hatred increased effect. In endgame, we get our both rings, a bone ring with increased minion damage and attack speed. If you can't get both, try to get there gradually, get one affix, get defensive stats and attributes in there. We don't care about the implicit, If you find a corrupted one with good better implicit, it's okay. If you can't, it's just there, as our minions are immune to elemental damage. In endgame, please catalyze your Baited Breath with defense modifiers catalysts. In endgame, you should have your cluster jewels set up as well as your primordial jewels. I recommend using 2 primordial eminence stones, corrupted or not, depending on how rich you are, and the anima stone to get 2 more golems. For our large cluster jewel, getting a 3 passive cluster jewel is gonna be pricey. You don't have to get it immediately, but at least get 8 passives just to fit your reservation small clusters. These are gonna be a bit pricey as well, early on in the league especially, but if you can make the currency for it, it is all for fitting determination. About which map mods to avoid, try to avoid anything that stops you from regenerating energy shield. If you are a hardcore player, you already know what to avoid. If you are a softcore player, this build can run most map mods. Just try to avoid map mods that are out there, as I mentioned before. Reflect, they cannot regenerate energy shield. For tips about this build, try to favorite open area maps like Cemetery, because minions tend to get stuck between each other and they can't all attack the same target sometimes if they are in tight spaces. Try to apply your Frostbite and Frostbomb to packs that you deem to be tanky on rares and bosses periodically, so they don't drop the debuff. Try to Frost Blink on them occasionally to get that increased damage from Bone Chill. Your minions are gonna taunt enemies, maybe not all the times, but quite a bit of the time. So you just need to avoid their projectile attacks, AoE slams attacks, and just run around like a headless chicken in dense maps to stay alive. Your minions are gonna deal with the mobs as they deal a lot of damage, quite tanky, and even if they die, they resummon via the Ascendancy notable. Thank you again for watching this build guide video. If you like this video, please let me know. I will try to make more build guides as I have made some other builds. I will try to make new ones and I will try to make videos out of them. So if you like these videos, you can subscribe to my channel, the usual stuff, subscribe to my channel, like the video, etc. if you want. And if you want to do me a favor, you can follow my Twitch account where I occasionally stream my gameplay. You can keep me company and I can answer your questions about this build guide or other build guides. Again, thank you for watching. Goodbye, exiles.